I'm Senior Developer Advocate at Fox, and I'm here to tell you the fable of the bad KPI. There was once a developer advocate at a small startup. The small startup had never had a developer advocate before, so the developer advocate was asked, how can you determine how we will measure success of developer relations for our company? And this may be a familiar experience for many of you. The developer advocate began searching high and low, seeking advice from all the other teams. How do you measure your department's success? The developer advocate asked. We measure the sales pipeline and how quickly we can close deals, said sales. We measure how many leads we can generate for sales, said marketing. Give me a sec. And we measure velocity and how quickly we can get a feature to market and how well it's adopted, said product and engineering. So the developer advocate set off to try each of those measures. She tried to measure the number of sales she helped close, but then she was asked to help onboard the customers post-sale. She tried to measure the number of blog posts and website impressions she helped generate, but marketing began asking her to also help run webinars. And then she tried to measure her contributions to the company's SDKs so that developers could more easily adopt the API. But she couldn't get anyone in engineering to review her pull request. So the developer advocate turned to her community and asked, what do you measure? How do you prove the success of your work? And the community said to her, it depends. What do you need your developer relations program to do? And what do you want it to achieve? And so that's the question that I come to you with. There's not an ending to that fable. What is your vision for the future of your developer relations program? Because I can't tell you what the success looks like or how you might measure it. But by thinking about what you hope to achieve based on the existing context of your work, then you can figure that out and not be led astray by numbers that can only aim to be a proxy measurement. Your vision is your North Star. So how do you do that? Step one is you discover the universe. You zoom out and look at what's the product you're selling, what's the industry, what's the audience. Are you selling to a single developer or a team of developers? And then if you're selling to something like a team, how does that change the product? How does that change the community? And each progressive step after that is breaking down the problem further. If you know where your program should be in 3 years, then what do you need to do this year to move in the right direction? That's a really big question to think about. And so personally, I then take this idea of a data maturity model. Step two, what can you measure today and how can you measure it? Because that's the ultimate constraint. Is it can be great if you want to measure feelings, if you want to say, well, we want developers to love our product. How do you know that developers love your product? Do you have them do CSAT surveys? Is your company even equipped to do CSAT surveys? And so as you explore those questions, I think this model is really valuable to look at. Do you just have a data warehouse or a SQL table that you can query? Or do you have something nicer like a self-service dashboard? And maybe that's something that you iterate on as part of your foundation of developer relations is first you figure out what the dashboard looks like. And then you say, okay, you want to know about my KPIs? You want to know about the success of our program? You can go to this link anytime instead of spending all of your time advocating for yourself rather than getting to work on the things that are most important. And this is an iterative improvement. As this is layered, as you say, yeah, I am still affecting sales. So where do I need to get that data from? Well, now as that changes, that may turn into, well, I don't need to affect sales. I'm actually helping the marketing pipeline because as a part of the developer buyer journey, people are going to the developer docs. So I can attribute those sales to the developer docs and I don't have to touch each sale individually. But how do you do that? Well, that's probably a new tool. That's probably some improvement in the data pipeline. And step 3, start working on what you think will actually further the success of your program. Those other 2 steps are about understanding the landscape of not only what department you're in and who and what you want to achieve, and then how do you measure it. Now it's what do you start doing so that you have something to measure, and bring a compass with you. Do variance analysis. It can be great to measure the number of active participants in a forum, but if you're not going back and looking at, well, was that ever the right metric? Do we really need community engagement here, or do we need to get product awareness first? You won't know that unless you're reevaluating what you consider to be your measure of success. And that's it. It was only about a 5-minute talk, but thanks.
So, with that, Steve, I mean, I'm sure you have a boss. I'm sure your boss has a boss. As someone in the chain of bosses, still needs a line like, look, how do we decide the budget of the devrel organization or something? And there you go, you have to put a number. So what is your favorite number to put when somebody high up needs to decide?
I don't think I can give like a generic answer. And this is something that I didn't want to break down too far in this particular topic, because are you at a B2B company that happens to have an ecosystem flywheel where developers are important, but they may not be individuals? They may be, it may be like a Shopify format where you have businesses, individual developers within a merchant's organization, like your primary customer. Or you may be someone more like Twilio. You start out and you're business to developer, you're B2D. But consumer structured is not something that is great from a VC standpoint if you're pre-public. So then you're going to have to increase your prices. You're going to have to move out of that consumer market. And so the original KPIs that you had whenever you're growing as like that small business where you were just selling to one developer, now you're trying to sell to Salesforce. And how does that change the way that you engage and the tools that you provide? How does that change the environment? Now you need a team of developers that can all work on that product. And so for me, there's just no straightforward answer. It can vary so wildly, and to the point of data maturity, you're also constrained by how you can measure the proxy based off of the tools that you have. If you only have Google Analytics, that is bare minimum. Like you have something to look at. Maybe you can iterate on that, but now you have to consider, well, I'm trying to measure traffic to my developer docs, or I'm trying to link users cross domain with cookies. But what if because they're developers using an ad block? How does that change the way that we measure this? And can we trace that anymore? And so it begins to become a process of looking at many different points of data and trying to unify them if you can. But building a hypothesis, and that hypothesis should lead up to objectives that should lead up to the direction of the success of the program. And what are you trying to say internally about what you're hoping to achieve, whether that is product excellence or that is something closer to community building. And not that those are inherently disparate, but just as examples.
And with all these data points, apparently you need tools to somehow sort them and still get a few numbers. Do you use any of the tools?
Yeah. So it's all varied by the companies I've been to. I've never been at a company for developer relations or a developer product smaller than really 200 people. So that was using something like Redash to have a digital interface to our data warehouses. That's something that I do here at Box as well. I may do a direct connection to those data warehouses and start trying to do table joins and query data because we don't have dashboards. At Atlassian, I had dashboards and I would pair that information and that all would try to ladder up to a larger picture of what it is that's happening. How many product downloads are we getting? Is that a change month over month, year over year? This is also a problem specific to the devrel space that I think Patrick's tool has aimed to try to help address, which is these things are questions that are not easily addressed or answered by tools that have traditionally been made for marketing and sales or engineering. We are not measured the same way, and we do not truly fit in any of these businesses because we are all these departments. We are all these tasks. So how do you get a tool to work for you? And either that is you through elbow grease, make it yourself. It's the build versus buy conversation. And then who can you get to build it? Does it have to be you? Is it someone else internally? Because I can name 20 different tools that might give you some of this information.
Salesforce.
Yeah, so, Salesforce is another CRM. There's Mixpanel, there's Segment, there's all of these tools that you can start measuring behavior. You can look at GitHub stars, but do those numbers matter to the real goal that you have? Or are those a temporary Band-Aid and a solace to get someone else off your back because they don't understand the value that devrel provides? Because you haven't sold them on the narrative. You haven't sold them on the story of what you want to do. So I think that is, rather than relying on someone else looking at those numbers and saying, well, you told us this was your measure of success and it hasn't gotten any better, and then having to recontextualize that data all of the time. If you get buy-in on the idea of where you should be and what that will do for the company, and then you have to adjust your measures of success, it becomes a much easier conversation because you have a cheerleader, basically, because they understand that your goals align to the business needs.